They say the people closest to you can hurt you in ways strangers never could. But nothing could have prepared me for the night a man I trusted shattered my door, shattered my body, and left me wondering if my own mother would ever choose me over him. What happened after that night didn't just change me, it horrified even the police. My name's Louise, I'm 32 now, and I work as a trauma therapist in Boston. But the truth is, my career isn't just a choice, it's born out of survival. Because 7 years ago, on the night of my 25th birthday, everything I thought I knew about family and safety collapsed in the most violent way imaginable. The man who destroyed that night was my stepfather, Frank. For more than a decade he terrorized our family, controlling my mother and silencing me in ways that left scars deeper than bruises. When he broke into my apartment drunk and raging, when he dislocated my shoulder and slammed me into walls, when I saw my mother frozen in the doorway doing nothing, that was the moment I realized how far his control reached. But before I tell you how that night ended, I need to explain how it began. Because the truth is, the seeds of that nightmare were planted years earlier. My early childhood was quiet and steady, even happy in its own way. My dad, my real dad, was my anchor. But when I was 8 years old, everything changed. Lung cancer took him away from me fast and cruel, leaving just me and my mom, Diane, to figure life out together. For the next 4 years it was just us. She worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on and food in the fridge, but no matter how tired she was, she always made time for me. Friday nights meant movies curled up on the couch. Saturdays usually smelled like cookies baking. And she never missed a single school play or recital. Even though we were scraping by, those years felt like the safest place in the world. But nothing stays the same forever. When I turned 12, my mom met Frank, and that was when everything shifted. She just started a new job at the bank as a teller, and he was the branch manager. On paper, Frank looked like the kind of man every single mom dreamed of meeting: stable job, polished manners, financially secure. I remember the first night she brought him home for dinner. He walked in holding a bouquet of flowers for mom and a book about stars for me, because she told him I loved astronomy. He was smooth, charming, attentive, and he acted like he really wanted to know me. And for a while, I believed it. I was still missing my dad, and Frank seemed patient enough to give me space. He'd take us to the zoo, to museums, always making sure I felt included. 6 months later, he proposed. By the time I was 13, my mom was a bride again. The wedding was small but tasteful, exactly how she wanted it. And just like that, our lives were upgraded. Frank had money, way more than we were used to, and he moved us into his big colonial-style house in a wealthy neighborhood. I had my own room with a brand new computer, my own bookshelf stacked with things I'd never been able to afford before. For a few months, it honestly felt like a dream come true. But dreams can turn into traps. And Frank was building one around us, piece by piece. At first, the changes were so subtle I barely noticed. Frank liked to make it sound like he was just being practical. He convinced my mom to close her personal bank account and merge everything into his. He had a perfectly reasonable explanation: less hassle, fewer fees, more efficient. And my mom, desperate to believe she had finally found security again, went along with it without much of a fight. That was just the start. Soon he started commenting on my mom's friends. According to him, Karen was a gossip, Susan was a bad influence because she talked too much about her divorce, and Jennifer? She was a reckless spender who would only encourage mom to waste money too. One by one, mom stopped calling them back. Girls' nights disappeared. Visits stopped happening. Her world got smaller, and so did mine. And the woman I had grown up with, the one who used to sing while stirring spaghetti sauce or laugh until she cried over dumb jokes, started fading. She checked with Frank before making even the tiniest purchases. The bright, fun clothes she loved disappeared, replaced with respectable things Frank approved of. She even stopped wearing the red lipstick she had always said made her feel beautiful. The first time I saw his anger up close, I was 14. Mom had bought herself a sundress for a staff picnic. It wasn't even expensive. But Frank snapped. He didn't hit her that night, not yet. Instead, he hurled his dinner plate across the room, and it shattered against the wall, spaghetti sauce dripping down the wallpaper like blood. His face twisted with rage as he called her irresponsible, ungrateful, reckless. Mom apologized over and over, shaking, and the very next day she returned the dress. She never shopped alone again. By the time I started high school, I already knew the rules of survival. Keep my distance. Don't provoke him. Stay invisible. I signed up for every after-school activity I could just to stay away from home. On weekends, I hid out at the library or crashed at friends' houses. When I was home, my bedroom was my safe zone. I kept the door shut and only came out when I had no choice. Strangely enough, Frank didn't complain. If anything, he seemed to prefer me out of sight, out of mind. But my relationship with Mom? It started slipping away. The bond we once had, our secret jokes, our Friday nights, our little world, it was gone. I tried to talk to her about it once. I told her Frank was controlling, that I didn't like the way he treated her. She brushed me off immediately. You don't understand adult relationships, she told me firmly. Frank takes care of us. We're lucky to have him. That was the moment I realized I had lost her. She wasn't the same mom anymore. She was his. And no matter how much I wanted her back, she wasn't coming to my side. By the time I was 16, I had stopped trying. We lived in the same house, but it felt like we existed in two separate worlds. And then one night, I walked in on her in the bathroom, covering a bruise on her cheek with makeup. She claimed she had walked into a door, but I saw it in her eyes, the lie, the shame, the fear. That was the night I knew for certain Frank had crossed the line from emotional abuse to physical violence. I begged her to leave him. I begged her to save herself. But she just shook her head and whispered, it was a one-time mistake. He's been stressed from work. I knew better. But I was 16 years old, powerless, and living in a house where the man in charge wanted me silent. So I made myself a promise, if I couldn't save her, then I would save myself. The next 2 years of my life turned into a careful balancing act, avoiding Frank while secretly planning my escape. I buried myself in schoolwork, determined to keep my grades flawless. Education was going to be my ticket out, and I clung to that thought every single day. While other kids my age were worrying about prom or football games, I was researching scholarships, studying until my eyes burned, and filling out college applications in the library where Frank couldn't hover over me. I took a part-time job at a little bookstore downtown. The pay wasn't much, but every dollar I saved felt like a brick in the foundation of my freedom. I told myself that if I could just hold on until graduation, I'd be free. Frank, strangely enough, seemed almost proud of my accomplishments. In his twisted mind, my academic success reflected well on him. He liked bragging to his co-workers that his daughter was a straight-A student, so he left me alone most of the time. The less he noticed me, the better. The day I opened my acceptance letter from Boston University, I locked myself in my room and cried for almost an hour. Relief, joy, disbelief, all of it hit me at once. And then I saw the scholarship offer. It was enough to cover tuition and most living expenses. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Frank actually congratulated me when I told him, his voice full of fake pride. I think in his mind, me leaving meant one less variable he had to control. My mom, though, she seemed torn. I could see pride in her eyes, but also a quiet fear. Like she knew I was slipping away from her, and she didn't know how to let me go. The night before I left for college, she came into my room after Frank had gone to bed. She sat down on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little and whispered, I'm proud of you. You're going to do amazing things. Her voice cracked, and I could hear something underneath: longing, regret, sadness. It made my chest ache. Come with me, I blurted out. We could get a tiny apartment in Boston. You could start fresh. Just you and me. For a second, her eyes lit up like she wanted it. But then, just as quickly, the resignation settled back over her face. She shook her head. This is my life now, Louise, she whispered. But it doesn't have to be yours. Promise me you'll build yourself a good life. The next morning, Frank drove us to Boston. He didn't say a word the entire trip, just stared at the road with his jaw locked tight. When we got to the dorm, he played the role of the perfect stepfather, hauling my boxes upstairs and smiling politely at my roommate's parents. When it was time to go, Mom hugged me tight and whispered, I love you, in my ear. I could feel her trembling. Frank gave me a stiff pat on the shoulder and slipped a check into my hand for emergencies. I never cashed it. That first night in my dorm room, with the sounds of students laughing in the hallways and music drifting through the walls, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I was free. It felt like stepping out of a cave and into the sun. College was like walking into a whole new world. For years, my life had been built around survival, tiptoeing around Frank, hiding in my room, waiting for the next explosion. But once I moved into that dorm, it was like I'd been dropped into sunlight after years underground. I made friends who knew nothing about my past, nothing about the tension that had been the air I breathed at home. I joined study groups, hung out late at night in the dining hall, even tried out for the debate team. For the first time in forever, I wasn't just existing, I was living. My roommate, Zoe, was studying journalism. She was bold, loud, and surrounded by an eclectic group of friends who adopted me into their circle almost instantly. I remember sitting in a crowded coffee shop with them one night, listening to their wild stories and laughing so hard my stomach hurt, and realizing I finally felt normal. During sophomore year, I declared psychology as my major. I didn't just want to study it, I needed to. I wanted to understand what had happened in my family. Why did my mom stay? Why did Frank need to control everything? Could I have done something differently? The questions burned inside me, and I chased answers through every lecture, every book, every late-night paper. My professors noticed my drive, some even said it felt more personal than academic. They were right. It was personal. One professor in particular, Sarah Levine, became more than just a teacher. She specialized in trauma and domestic violence, and from the moment I sat in her class, I felt like she was speaking directly to me. She became my mentor, and eventually, my friend. During one of her office hours, I finally broke down and told her the truth about my past. The words spilled out in a way they never had before, about Frank, about my mom, about the years of silence and fear. I expected pity. What I got instead was understanding. She didn't look at me like I was broken. She looked at me like I was strong. She gave me reading recommendations, pointed me toward support groups for kids of abusive households, and gently suggested therapy. The patterns we grow up with shape us, she said, but they don't have to define us. Understanding them is the first step to breaking free. Meanwhile, things with my mom stayed complicated. Our calls were brief, surface level, always timed when Frank wasn't around. She never admitted what was really happening. She always insisted she was fine. I went home for the holidays freshman year, but the house felt suffocating. By the second year, I started making excuses to stay on campus for breaks. When mom visited me in Boston, it was always alone, always with this nervous habit of glancing over her shoulder, as if Frank could appear at any second. To support myself, I worked 20 hours a week at the university library. The quiet, organized space felt like the opposite of my chaotic childhood. I lived frugally, thrift store clothes, instant noodles, whatever it took to stay independent. I refused to take a single dime from Frank. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And after the life I had come from, that meant everything. By junior year, life threw me something I hadn't been expecting, Eric. We met in an abnormal psychology class. He was training to become a clinical social worker, and he had this calm, patient energy that drew people in. Unlike the few guys I'd casually dated before, Eric actually listened. He noticed when certain topics made me flinch or shut down, and instead of pushing, he gave me space. That kind of patience was new to me. Slowly, I started letting him in. At first, I only revealed small pieces, an offhand comment about how home wasn't great, a mention of Frank in passing. But Eric never judged, never pressed. He just stayed steady, and eventually I trusted him with the whole story. When I finally told him about my mom, about Frank's abuse, about the way I grew up, he didn't try to fix it or throw out empty cliches. He just looked at me and said, "Your mom needs help. But so do you." Having a parent trapped in an abusive relationship affects you, even from the outside. It hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. With his encouragement, I started therapy at the university's counseling center. My therapist, Dr. Melissa, was patient and direct in ways I didn't know I needed. She helped me dig through the messy, tangled knot of emotions I had buried for years, the anger at my mom for choosing Frank, the guilt for not being able to save her, the resentment and fear that still lived in me long after I left home. Little by little, I learned something important. I couldn't save my mom if she wasn't ready to be saved. But I could save myself. I could break the cycle. I could build a life that didn't look anything like the one Frank had created. I poured myself into school even harder. By the time graduation rolled around, I was walking across that stage summa cum laude. My professors cheered, Professor Levine wrote glowing recommendation letters for grad programs, and for the first time, I actually believed I had a future. Mom came to my graduation. She sat alone in the crowd while Frank claimed he had a work emergency. I remember spotting her in the audience. She looked older than her age, her brown hair now streaked with gray, her shoulders slightly hunched like she was bracing herself for something even in that joyful moment. Afterward, she took me out to dinner at a little Italian place near campus. She smiled at me across the table and said, "I always knew you'd do something special. Your father would have been so proud." I reached for her hand and told her I was staying in Boston, that I'd found an apartment, that I had a job lined up at a community mental health center. "You could visit," I said. "Stay as long as you want. You'd always have a place with me." She squeezed my hand, but then pulled away, fidgeting with her napkin. "I'll try," she said softly. "But things are busy. With Frank. With the house." Her voice trailed off. She couldn't promise me anything, and we both knew why. As I watched her taxi pull away that night, I had this hollow ache in my chest. I had finally broken free, but she was still trapped. And I didn't know if I'd ever get my real mother back. After graduation, I settled into my own little life in Boston. I found a one-bedroom apartment in a converted brownstone in Somerville. The rent stretched my budget thin, but the freedom it gave me was worth every penny. For the first time ever, I had a space that was completely mine. No one controlled it, no one walked through the door uninvited. It was small, but it felt like a sanctuary. I worked at the Riverside Community Mental Health Center, mostly handling paperwork for licensed therapists and occasionally sitting in on group sessions. The pay wasn't much, but the experience was priceless, especially since I was taking part-time graduate courses in clinical psychology. Every day, I felt like I was building the life my mom had begged me to create. 6 months in, Eric messaged me out of the blue. We had broken things off after graduation, deciding long distance wouldn't work when he took a job in Chicago. But now, he was back in Boston with a new position. His message was simple: "Want to grab coffee and catch up?" Coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into dates, and before long, we were back together. Only this time, it felt different. We'd both grown. He was more confident, more certain of his path. I was more grounded, more open. We slipped back into each other's lives like we had never left. For a while, things were good. Really good. But then the cracks from my old life started creeping back in. One evening during a video call with Mom, I noticed a faint yellow bruise under her eye. When I asked about it, she quickly adjusted the camera and brushed it off with some excuse about tripping on the stairs while carrying laundry. Her smile was too forced, her eyes darting like she was checking if someone was listening. "Mom," I said gently, "you know you can tell me anything, right? If something's happening, I can help." "Everything's fine, sweetie," she insisted, her voice too bright, too rehearsed. Then, just like that, she changed the subject, asking about my classes, my job, anything to steer the conversation away. I didn't push her that night, but inside, I knew. Things were getting worse. I started calling more often, trying to catch her at different times of the day. Sometimes she picked up, but most times she didn't. And when she did, her answers were clipped, careful, like someone else was always in the room. Around that time, I befriended a colleague named Catherine who specialized in domestic violence cases. Without giving away my mom's details, I asked her general questions: how abuse escalates, what resources are available, what victims need to know. Catherine's answer chilled me. The most dangerous time is when someone tries to leave. That's when abusers feel their control slipping, and that's when they're most likely to explode. Safety has to come first in any escape plan. That night, I started doing my own research. I saved phone numbers for shelters near my parents' town, wrote down addresses, looked into restraining orders, legal protections, support groups. I kept everything hidden in a password-protected folder on my computer. But all of it meant nothing if Mom wasn't ready. And deep down, I feared she never would be. 3 months before my 25th birthday, my phone rang during dinner with Eric. It was my mom, but her voice was so shaky I could barely hear her. He found it, she whispered. My stomach dropped. Found what? The brochure. For the Women's Center. The one you mailed me. Her breath hitched. He went through my purse. I froze. I could hear her trying not to cry, her words rushed and desperate. He says I'm ungrateful. That I'm planning to leave him. He smashed my phone. I'm calling from the neighbor's landline while he's out. My heart was pounding. Mom, listen to me. Pack a small bag, just essentials. I'll call you an Uber to the bus station. You can come here. You'll be safe. I can't just leave, she protested weakly. The house? My job? What would people think? None of that matters if you're not safe. My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to stay firm. Mom, I'm scared of what he'll do. Please. Silence stretched on the line, and I thought she was going to hang up. Finally, she whispered, maybe you're right. Let me think about it. I'll call you tomorrow when he's at work. When I hung up, Eric was staring at me, his face pale. Do you think she's in immediate danger? Should we call the police? I don't know, I admitted, tears burning my eyes. Frank is careful. He's never done anything that would get him arrested. If we call the cops and nothing happens, it could make everything worse. We stayed up half the night talking through options, building what we thought could be a safety plan. But when my mom finally called the next day, my heart sank at her voice. Everything's fine now, she said, too cheerful, too fake. Frank and I talked. He was just worried about me being influenced by the wrong people. We're going to start marriage counseling. I knew instantly she wasn't alone. I could practically hear him standing over her shoulder, feeding her lines. Mom, I whispered, are you sure? You know you can tell me if. Absolutely sure, she cut me off. Oh, Frank wants to say hello. Before I could stop her, his voice filled the line, smooth, controlled, dangerous. Louise. How nice to hear you've been keeping in touch with your mother. I hope you're not filling her head with nonsense about our relationship. I swallowed hard. I just want her to be safe and happy. She is both those things, with me, he replied, a subtle threat hidden under his pleasant tone. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of interfering in ours. Family is sacred, Louise. Remember that. The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaking. That night, I called the local police, desperate for someone to help. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic, but his words crushed me. Without evidence of a crime or your mother directly reporting abuse, our hands are tied. If she calls us and says she's in danger, we'll be there immediately. But we can't force help on someone who doesn't ask for it. For the next few weeks, I tried everything: calling, texting, emailing. Most of the time I got no answer. The few texts I did get were generic, like they'd been written under supervision. Updates about gardening, about the weather, about nothing that mattered. As my birthday crept closer, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. Something was coming. I could feel it. My 25th birthday landed on a crisp Friday in late October. The kind of evening when the air feels sharp, and the leaves crunch under your shoes like glass. Normally, I might have planned a night out with friends or something romantic with Eric. But that year, Eric had a last-minute client emergency, so he promised we'd celebrate the next night instead. Tomorrow will be worth the wait, he said that morning, kissing me goodbye. At work, my colleagues surprised me with cupcakes and a little gift card. Throughout the day, my phone buzzed with texts and social media messages. I even tried calling my mom a few times, but as expected, she didn't answer. I left her a cheerful voicemail, avoiding any mention of Frank, just telling her I loved her. That evening, I treated myself. I grabbed takeout from my favorite Thai spot, poured a glass of wine, and curled up on my couch with a novel I'd been meaning to read. My apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine. High ceilings, big windows, plants scattered across thrift store shelves. For me, it was safety. A sanctuary. By 11 p.m., I changed into pajamas and was dozing off when the pounding started. My eyes shot open. I scrambled for my phone, the glowing numbers reading 12:17 a.m. The pounding grew louder, rattling my door in its frame. Then I heard it, his voice. "Open this door, Louise." My blood went cold. "Frank. I know you're in there." His words slurred with alcohol, his fists hammering against the wood. Heart racing, I crept to the peephole. He was standing in the hallway, face red, eyes wild. And behind him, half hidden, was my mother. Her expression was blank, frozen, like a mask of pure terror. "What are you doing here?" I called through the door, trying to keep my voice steady while frantically texting Eric with one hand under the table. "It's after midnight," I added, my voice louder. "We came to wish you happy birthday." Frank shouted, his tone a grotesque parody of cheer. "Open up, Louise. Don't be rude to your parents." "Go away," I warned. "I'll call the police." That was when it happened. His voice exploded into a roar. "You ungrateful little b********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** Wood splintered around the lock. 2 more kicks and the frame gave way, the door bursting open like it was made of cardboard. Frank stumbled inside, rage pouring off him like heat. I backed away, clutching my phone. "I'm calling 911. I screamed, my thumb already dialing. But he was fast, too fast. His massive frame lunged forward, knocking the phone out of my hand. It skidded across the floor. Before I could react, his fist tangled in my hair, yanking me forward so hard my scalp burned. Pain shot through my head, and then his knuckles smashed into my cheekbone, sending white stars across my vision. "Frank, stop!" My mom's voice shrieked from the doorway. Thin. Terrified. "Please, you're hurting her." He didn't even look at her. He dragged me by the hair across the living room and slammed me against the wall. My skull cracked against the plaster, dazing me. I clawed at his face, kicked at his shins, but he outweighed me by at least 100 pounds. "Mom, help me!" I screamed, locking eyes with her over Frank's shoulder. She just stood there, hands over her mouth, paralyzed. "Please, Mom." But she didn't move. Frank spun me around, twisting my right arm behind my back. He shoved upward with brutal force until I heard a sickening pop. Pain exploded white-hot, so blinding it felt like my world narrowed to a tunnel. I screamed, the sound raw, primal. "This is what happens," Frank hissed into my ear, his breath reeking of whiskey, "when you try to destroy a family. This is what you deserve." Then he slammed me into the wall again, right on my dislocated shoulder. The agony made my stomach heave. I felt ribs crack when he punched me in the side, and another blow caught my temple, sending me sprawling to the floor. Through swollen eyes, I spotted my phone just inches away. With everything I had left, I crawled and reached for it, slamming the emergency SOS button. 3 quick presses. Location sent. Frank's boot connected with my ribs again, and I curled into a ball, choking on the taste of blood. Consciousness started slipping like water through my fingers. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was my mother's face, tears streaming down, her mouth moving in words I couldn't hear. And in the distance, faint but growing louder, were sirens. The sound that pulled me back wasn't sirens. It was the steady beeping of a heart monitor. When I finally forced my eyes open, everything was a blur of white walls and fluorescent light. Pain radiated from everywhere, my ribs, my shoulder, my face. Even breathing hurt. Then I felt it, a warm hand holding mine. I turned my head, and there was Eric, sitting in a chair, his fingers laced with mine, his head bowed like he'd been praying or hadn't slept in days. "Eric," I croaked, my throat dry and raw. His head snapped up. Relief washed over his face so strong it nearly broke me. "Louise," he whispered. "Thank God. You're awake." He fumbled for the call button, and within moments, a nurse and doctor rushed in. They checked my vitals, asked questions to test my memory, and explained my injuries: a dislocated shoulder they'd already reset, 2 fractured ribs, a concussion, and heavy bruising across my face and body. "You're lucky," the doctor said softly. If the police hadn't arrived when they did, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The memories came flooding back, Frank breaking down my door, his fist smashing into my face, the sound of my shoulder tearing out of its socket. My mom frozen in the doorway. "Frank," I whispered. "My stepfather. He attacked me." My mom, she was there. Eric squeezed my hand, his jaw tight with anger. "He's in custody. The police arrested him at the scene. Your mom's here too, she's been in the waiting room all night, but she was too scared to come in." Mom. Even hearing that word made my chest ache. A police officer arrived soon after, a kind woman named Officer Rivera. She gently explained that she needed my statement while everything was still fresh. With Eric's hand steadying me, I told her everything, every slam, every punch, every scream. She nodded gravely. "We have him on charges of breaking and entering, assault, and battery. Your emergency call recorded part of the attack, and the evidence of forced entry is clear. The medical report will support the case. The question is, do you want to press charges?" "Yes." My voice shook, but I didn't hesitate. "I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent possible." She nodded. "Good. Too many victims are afraid to go forward. We'll also help you file for a restraining order. He won't be able to come near you again." After she left, Eric explained what I'd missed. The text I'd managed to send before Frank broke in had gotten through just enough for him to call the police. When he arrived at my apartment, the door was hanging off its hinges, blood on the wall, paramedics rushing me out on a stretcher. Frank was already cuffed in the back of a squad car. And my mom? Eric said she'd been hysterical, alternating between sobbing and total silence. She'd given the police a statement that confirmed everything. I was still trying to process all of this when a soft knock came at the door. It was her. My mom stepped inside, and she looked small. Fragile. Her face pale, dark circles bruising her eyes. "Can I come in?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Eric glanced at me, silently asking if I wanted this. I nodded. He squeezed my hand, then slipped out, leaving us alone. Mom walked slowly to my bed. When she got close enough to see my bruises, she broke down, covering her mouth with her hands as fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "Louise, I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to scream at her. To tell her it was too late. That she'd chosen him over me too many times. But another part, maybe the bigger part, looked at her trembling hands, her flinching shoulders, and finally saw it. She wasn't just a bystander. She was a victim too. "Sit down, Mom," I said softly, pointing to the chair beside me. She perched on the edge, twisting her fingers. "I never thought he'd hurt you," she whispered. "He threatened to, so many times, but I thought it was just words. I thought if I stayed, if I gave him everything he wanted, he'd leave you alone." I stared at her, my chest tight. "How long has he been hurting you?" She hesitated. Then the dam broke. "Since about a year after we married," she confessed. "It started with pushing. Grabbing my arm too hard. Then slaps he apologized for right after, swearing it would never happen again. But it always did. He took my money, cut me off from my friends, told me I was worthless. By the time it got really bad, I was trapped." Her voice cracked. "He threatened to kill you if I ever left. Said he'd find you, no matter where you went. I believed him, Louise. I stayed to protect you. And in the end, I failed." Her words gutted me. The twisted logic of abuse victims, I'd studied it, I'd heard it in classrooms, but hearing it from my own mother shattered me. "What made him come after me now?" I asked, my voice shaking. She swallowed hard. "Your birthday card. The note you wrote, saying your door was always open for me. He found it. He went into a rage. He said you were trying to steal me away. He forced me into the car. Said he was going to teach you a lesson." Her whole body crumpled, sobs shaking her shoulders. "I should have stopped him. I should have done something. But when he started hitting you, I froze. I've never hated myself more than I do right now. I wanted to tell her it was okay. But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay." Still, for the first time, she wasn't denying. She wasn't defending him. She was admitting the truth. And that mattered. The next morning, the hospital room filled with people, nurses, lawyers, advocates. Catherine, my colleague from the mental health center, even showed up. She'd heard what happened from Eric and came armed with pamphlets, resources, and, most importantly, a lawyer named Jessica who specialized in domestic violence cases. Jessica didn't waste time. She explained Frank's charges, the process ahead, and how both Mom and I could protect ourselves legally. "You've already taken the first step by agreeing to press charges," she told me. "Now we'll make sure he can't get near you again. And Diane," she turned to my mom, "if you're ready, we can protect you too." For the first time in years, my mom lifted her chin. Her voice shook, but she said, "I'll testify. I'm done being afraid." It took months for the case to work its way through court. Frank tried everything, denials, excuses, even fake remorse, but the evidence was overwhelming. The broken door. My injuries. The recording from my SOS call. My mother's testimony. When the verdict finally came, guilty on multiple counts of assault and battery, plus breaking and entering, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, safe. Frank was sentenced to prison. For the first time, the monster wasn't looming over us anymore. Mom moved out of his house right after the trial. With Catherine and Jessica's help, she started counseling, attended support groups, and slowly began piecing herself back together. She stayed with me in Boston for a while, and even though it wasn't perfect, there was guilt, distance, so many scars, it was a start. As for me, that night changed everything. I had always been drawn to psychology, but surviving Frank's violence, pressing charges, and helping my mom take her first real steps toward freedom, it gave me purpose. It lit a fire in me to help others who felt trapped the way we had. That's why I became a trauma therapist. Not because I read about it in books. Not because I studied case files. But because I lived it. And sometimes, when I sit across from a client who feels hopeless, who thinks they'll never escape, I can look them in the eye and tell them the truth. You can survive this. You can break free. You are stronger than you think. Because if my story proves anything, it's that even when the people who are supposed to protect you fail, even when you feel powerless, even when the darkness almost swallows you whole, there's still a way forward. That night nearly destroyed me. But it also gave me the life I have now. And I'll never stop fighting, for myself, for my mom, and for anyone still trapped in the kind of nightmare we escaped.